Hi Needlepoint friends, today I'm going to show you how to self-finish a padded hanger. You'll need your canvas all stitched, you'll need a padded hanger, you'll need a curved needle. You can do it with a straight needle, but I do recommend a curved needle. You'll need some nylon either in or thread, either matching what you're sewing or invisible, which is what I prefer to use. You will need some pins. You will need some scissors, and you'll need a backing fabric to use on the back of the canvas. Some backing fabric to use on the back of the canvas. If your fabric is really lightweight, and this is thicker, but if you were using perhaps a silk or something that's quite thin, you might want to consider also using a fusible interface before you use the fabric so that you can attach that to the fabric so it's thicker. I did that when I was using silk to finish this one. You can see I've used silk on the back here. To make the silk a bit sturdier, I applied a fusible interface before I stitched with it. This is what your canvas will end up looking like. You will need a sewing machine to do along the top. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to stitch along the top here. Take a little break there. This is using the machine along there. And then we're going to hand stitch using a blind stitch under the base here. And then you'll have a beautiful padded hanger. Once you get the hang of it, it only takes about an hour to finish a beautiful finished hanger. First thing we need to do with the canvas is we need to cut it out. You'll be cutting around the shape of the canvas, leaving 5 rows around the canvas to give yourself some flexibility. You probably need a little less along the top because you'll be stitching that down the machine, but I like to give myself lots of flexibility along the bottom to have a little bit of extra, and because you need to go over the bulk of the padded hanger. This is just a standard padded hanger, and we are not removing the fabric that's already on here. We are just covering over the top. I do take off the ribbon in the middle when I stitch over though. One of the things with doing sewing is you do want to always make sure that you have ironed the fabric before you use it. It will not be easy to iron it on the top. Now, looking at this fabric now, this one I'm going to use, it is a little light, so I'm going to apply fusible interfacing to make sure it's nice and thick and sturdy over the hanger. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to cut a piece first of the fabric that would cover this. So I'm just going to cut a square of it, and then I'll show you how to apply the fusible interfacing. Fusible interfacing is available online. You can get different weights of it. I'll just be using a medium weight for mine. So I'm going to cut this out now, just a square of this, and then we'll go over and I'll show you how to apply the fusible interface as well. When using fusible interface, this is what it looks like. You can feel on one side it will feel rough. What that roughness is small little bits of plastic or silicone that will melt when heat is applied. It is really, really important to make sure that you have the bumpy side attached to the wrong side of your fabric. So if you have a fabric with a pattern, like for example, this yellow fabric, you would want the bumpy side to go to the wrong side of the fabric, because once you iron it down, the heat on this side melts the fabric into this. You do not want the bumpy side to touch your iron, otherwise it will melt your iron and it is a huge, huge mess. So make sure when you've got your interface, the bumpy side on the wrong side of your fabric, and when you iron it, it will fuse them together and add stability to your fabric. So I have my fabric here. I should iron my fabric first. You want a dry iron. You do not want steam. So make sure you have your setting on no steam. Gonna iron your fabric. Make sure it's nice. I'm not pressing down super hard because I'm not on my ironing board and I don't want to start a fire. But you want your, especially with something like linen, which you get so many wrinkles in, or silk, you want to make sure it's nice and flat before you do the fusible interface. Now, if you wanted to use steam just while you're ironing just the fabric before doing the interface, that's fine. Now, you can either measure them exactly to match so that you have the whole piece, but since I know I only need enough to cover the actual design piece, I'm going to just cut a piece that's smaller than this, this fabric here, okay? So you can see I have my fusible interface here. I have my piece of fabric that I'm going to fuse it to, and just make sure that it will fit on this. So what I'm going to do is, again, make sure this is it's really obvious which side's the bumpy side. This is the bumpy side. I can feel how rough it is. If you look really closely, you can see the little dots on it. And then this is my smooth side. So the bumpy side is going down with my linen. I am on the back side, so I'm okay for that. And I'm going to iron this onto here. This will fuse them together. Hot iron. I'm kind of lifting it up a little bit in between when I'm holding it down, because you don't kind of want to smush it too much. Smush is the technical term. So now I can see it's fused there. I didn't quite get in the corner, and I don't want to pull it off. You can pull it off. So if you have messed up and you're like, yikes, I did something wrong, you can pull it off, but it will leave some residue. So this is all fused now, and look how much more stable this fabric is. So when I turn it over, it's much firmer and it's nicer to work with. So now I'm going to cut out what I need. I'm going to leave a little extra fabric around. Again, I like having a little fabric to play with. You are covering the bulk of this, so you do want a little extra fabric that you can work with. So I'll do a nice big wide cut around here, because the fabric's all being tucked in anyway. And if you're not using a super bulky fabric, like I'm not using a really bulky fabric with this linen, if you were using maybe a velvet or a big tweed or something heavier, you might want to leave even more, just because the bulk of it, even less, because the bulk of it could then make kind of lumps inside the canvas. So cut around here. And you can always trim off the fabric if you've got too much once you get going, but I just want you to have the most options possible when you start stitching. All right, So now I have my fabric ready, my fusible attached to it, and my canvas ready. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take the front side of my canvas to the front side of here. I'm going to mark the center with a pin. Now, some of the designs, it's really obvious. Other ones, it's not so obvious. So I'm just going to, you can use a ruler, or I'm just going to fold it in half. Match the corners. Do not look at the back of this canvas. It is not my best work. So now I know the center of the canvas is right here. Because when I'm stitching, I want to stitch along from here all the way to here on the machine, and I want to stop and leave a gap of about 4 stitches in between, because that gap is going to be where we push through the hanger part of the metal part of the hanger. Now, if you forget to do it, which I have on occasion, you can easily just go back and unpick and just fix it in. Oh, I need to put that back on. So it's easy to fix. That's not a end of the world sort of situation if you mess that up. So we're going to take your canvas face down, and we're going to stitch starting here on the machine along to here. Stop on either side, start again. Remember to back track when you're using your machine along all the way down to around here. So kind of down on this sort of edge here where the bottom of the straight stitches end there. Now you could, if you wanted to, even come around a little bit on the side here so that you can kind of slip it in, but you wouldn't be able to get it in both sides. So you could do a little bit more on one side to help you, or kind of like that, if you're okay with sort of forcing the canvas over the hanger once you get there, because you'll see where the hanger is going to go is obviously in there. Okay, so with your machine, when you're stitching along, stitch through the top row. So I'm going to aim right kind of where that little V is. I've designed it so there's enough extra give on it that you will still get over, but you don't want any hanging out. So I stitch through the top row. So on these, you can see there, I've stitched through the top row along. All right, let's do it. So I've used the sewing machine and I've stitched all the way along here. You can see how I've gone through the top row of stitching. Now I'm going to pull out the pin and we can flip it over and check how it looks. So I'm going to turn it out at the ends here. It's looking pretty good. There's a hole in the middle to put the hanger, the metal part portion of the hanger through, but otherwise the connection looks good. So now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to trim down some of this bulk along the outside here. So I'm going to use this, just trim down along the edge here so that it is not too thick when we flip it over. Now we're going to flip out our canvas. You could press this down a little bit if you wanted to, but I found you don't really need to because it's sitting on top of the padded portion of the hanger anyway. Kind of pop out those corners. Now, with the corners, you might need to do some little cuts to reduce the bulk in the corners here. Sorry, that is not my stomach growling, that is my dog. In case you're hearing little growls. So this helps remove some of the bulk around the edges so you can flip it out. find that little center hole, grab your hanger, and we're going to feed it up through the little hole you left. If you were using a padded hanger that has a ribbon tied around the center and around the metal part of the hanger, I would recommend removing that ribbon before you place it in the needlepoint stitch canvas. Otherwise, it can create a little lump underneath the finishing. Okay. You need to kind of force the ends over a bit. They're going to be a little tight, but that is the idea. So I've got one on. Let's see if we can get the other one on. I think I've done this one a little too tight, so I'm just going to uncut a couple threads here and use a seam ripper just to loosen it up a little bit so I can get it over the end of the hanger. There we go. Nice. So that is the easy part. Now the top's done. Like I said, you can press that down a little bit, give it a good squish, make sure everything's where you want it. And now we're going to pin along the bottom. This is a pain in the butt, but it's really essential because the final stage we have is stitching, and you want it to be doing a blind stitch. And so you need to pin to make sure it's all set before we do that. So let's do the pinning. If you're working with a design that has a central element like this line going down the middle, I would sometimes start the pin at the middle just so I know that it's not pulling sort of off. So sort of there, and then pin back to each side. But for now, I'm going to start with the ends. Now, the ends are the trickiest. These corners here are definitely the trickiest part of the whole operation. So you need to fold the fabric in. Sometimes you may need almost like a little tuck. It just kind of depends what were you stitching with. I'm removing some bulk here, you can see, because it's too thick at the moment. And you want to pin it so that you are covering up kind of like the bottom. I think when I snipped that, I snipped a little too close. So let's pull that up a little bit there. And then this fabric over so that I don't have any left out. I think I cut that too close there. You can see where I've cut that a little bit close, but I'm just gonna fold it in a little bit more. That's why I had the extra fabric, and then you won't be able to notice. Now, the pinning, essential. You need to pin. The pinning is going to make your life much easier once you start the sewing. So this takes a little bit of wrangling. You need to be tough with the fabric. Don't let the canvas or the fabric run you. You are the boss of the canvas and the fabric. So show them who's boss. And you can just tuck the fabric in. Now again, if you were using a heavier fabric, like a velvet or a thick wool or a tweed, I would remove some of the bulk around the edge so that you're not, so you don't kind of get a line through the canvas. You can see on one of mine, I had here on this one, this one's a good example of a little bit of a fail on this one. I did not pin close enough to the stitching, and I did not stitch into the stitching. So there's one that could have definitely used some improvement. This end, totally fine. This end, this was the first one I finished. Here you can see, for example, on this model, that I did a little tuck there to kind of remove some of the bulk. But you can see I left quite a bit of, I don't like how much canvas I left on the inside of this, and this was a very thin fabric. So you can kind of see the line there. So cut a little bit less out, or use a thicker fabric, or use a fabric where you won't see the line. Like I left a lot of canvas there. Again, like this is on the back, so you can't really notice, but it's just, you know, best practices as you go along. This is a more recent one. You can see it's much smoother. And same on the corners. Now I did some little tucks on the corners to get around there. And then on this one as well, you can kind of see there's like a little tuck. Sorry, there's a little tuck there for that. So we're going to be pinning along on this, folding the edge of the fabric over and pinning it through the top row there. You don't want to cover up too much of the design, obviously, but when I was designing this, I accounted for leaving a little extra bulk in so that you would cover a standard hanger, no problem. So if I come to the middle here, I'm folding it over, making sure it's not too loose on the back. And again, I can cut out a bit more of this so I don't get that line like I had with the other one, which I might do now actually. Just a little bit less. So, folding this over and then pinning to the bottom row. So I'm just covering that bottom row of stitches. It's easier if you've just done a 10 stitch. You just aim for just in between the bottom and the second row. Now, like I said, this pinning is a real pain in the butt. Because you're sort of working around this round object. So you will stab yourself. It's inevitable. Sometimes I have to kind of like pinch it different ways to try to get it through. But if you spend the time on the pinning, once you get to the sewing, doing the blind stitch round, it goes so fast because you've already done all the prep work. So think about it like this, folding, turn the canvas around, however you need to get it done, so you can get the pinning done. Nice strong pins so that they don't bend as you try to get through. So good when they come out the other side. You're like, I did it. So this one, kind of start in, and then I find if I go kind of towards the bottom and out, sometimes that works best. Sometimes it just ends up kind of pinning into the underneath. This is when you're really glad that you've added the fusible if you're working with a lightweight material, because it just gives you a lot more purchase when you're pinning. So it seems to work best if you sort of fold it up first, start the pin where you want it to hold, then kind of squeeze it, pinch it, and then kind of come out the bottom. That seems to be working the best this time. You can remove more bulk. You can see kind of around the corner, I've got that pin there. I'm just sort of feeding the fabric in There might end up being a little tuck. I've got a lot of fabric in here. I could cut out a little bit of this if I didn't want as much, but I find once I start sewing, I like having the little bit of extra, but that's sometimes how you end up with the little sort of tuck around the edge. So. And then I taco it. That one was a bit high. I want to start there and then come out. So the only thing left to do is to do a blind stitch along the canvas edge all along here to finish it. It's all pinned, ready to go. Now, I like to do my blind stitch with a curved needle and an invisible thread, nylon thread. This is what I'm using. And I'm right-handed, so I'm going to work from right to left. It's going to be a little tricky to see, so I wanted to show you, if you're not familiar with the blind stitch, how a blind stitch works. So, sorry, this is caught on a pin. So imagine this is the two edges of that you want to stitch together. So as if this was this and this was this underneath. And we want to stitch them together. And a blind stitch, it's also called an invisible stitch, draws the two sides together. So we're going to start. Oh, let me put a knot in. Say we've got our thread ready on, say, the orange side, like as if we were here, and we want to connect to the canvas side. You are going across and working in the fold to draw it together. So I've gone into the other side of the fabric, which is, say, the canvas. Like imagine this is the canvas. And then you're doing a little, I usually do about 3 stitches kind of over and then come out. So you're sort of working along that line where it's folded. So that's your first stitch. And you see how it draws the sides together and it's invisible. So it's gonna work the same way on the next side. So you come straight across from where you were, where you came out. You come through. I'm going sort of along that same line, like that would be the fold in here. So you can see how you can't see it. I'm doing obviously a much thicker thread, so it's easier for you to see. And then across. It's almost like you're doing a little ladder. Like picture it, you're going across, down, across, down, across, down, across, down, to work your way along. And then you can leave it even a little bit loose as you're sort of doing it, if you see if it's like that. And then when you pull at the end, it will tighten it all together and it will be invisible. So you can use this in lots of different finishing. It's a fantastic technique. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to do it on the canvas so you can see, but just in case you want an idea of sort of like where are we going. So you kind of come in, go down, like you're kind of sneaking along. And then you're going over to the other side and sort of sneaking along. So if I kind of hold it this way, maybe it'll be a bit easier to see. And then I'm coming to this side. And I'm not going through both of them like that. I'm going like through where the fold in the fabric is, because you want it to hold that to the other side so that when you pull them, they're nice and tight. So you see how that makes it flush to each other. And that's how you get an invisible stitch. Now, if I pull it apart, you can kind of see how it goes across, and it's going to look like that if you were able to see inside. So that's what I did all along here, and that's why you can't see anything, but it would come, say, well, you can kind of see like a stitch there. Let me get it in focus. But it goes across, goes underneath a few, comes out, goes over here, and you're going through that fold, underneath that fold, because that's what's keeping it nice and flush to the other side of the canvas. So let's start on our actual hanger. I really like doing an invisible stitch. It makes me, or a blind stitch, it makes me kind of feel like a witch. Now, I've done a really long piece of thread because I don't want to change halfway through. You can change, but you know, or if it drives you crazy getting kind of stuck. Now, I'm going to start kind of under here, back up where I've already stitched, just so, and this is why you need the curved needle. Can you see how I have to kind of curve to get it out? So I'm going to start back up where I've already had some of the machine stitching done, just because I want to make sure that end is nice and secure. It takes a little bit of a minute to get a hang of this if you've never done it before, so don't be hard on yourself. Be kind to yourself when you're learning new skills. It takes practice. I've been sewing a long time, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you know I make mistakes all the time. So there we go. So that's going to pull out. That's going to secure the end of the thread under in there so no one's going to see it. And then I'm going to start my blind stitch. So I've come up, I'm right now on the orange side. Sorry, let me try to get that in focus. And now I'm doing a little, well, that's like 3 or 4 stitches over. coming out. You know, I'm going to double this up more so it's not so long. Oh, and I just unthreaded my needle. Like I said, mistakes all the time. Okay, thread it again. Sorry, I know the clear is probably really hard to see on here. And then, so I've gone through the canvas side. Now I'm dipping through the orange side. Pulling that. And see, it's even pulled away a little bit from there. You can see how there's the white canvas. You don't have to worry about that. As soon as we pull this tight, it's gonna suck it up. You don't wanna run through under the stitch. I showed you on an earlier version where I'd gone too low. You wanna be right up on top of that last row of stitching at the bottom there so that you have a nice clean finish and it's gonna pull over the top. So you see, once I pull it, it's covering up. Now, let's go get another one. And you kind of have to feel through that because, again, you don't want to be, and this is another reason why it's good to have the fusible interface because it's keeping it nice. It's giving you a lot of strength to work with. Now, I'm not happy. I can see a little bit of canvas back there. I'm just going to go back. This probably isn't official stitching, but I'm not happy with it, so I'm going to go over it again and come lower here. Let's force it in and pull up higher over the top. You can see where I had my little stitch from before that I plucked out. So let's go up a little bit higher, pull this up. So that we don't have that white showing. Perfect. Now I'm going to keep working along. Hopefully it stays in focus so you can see. So. And come over on this side. Oh, too far away. You want to be directly opposite where you just did that last bit. So I need to be where you came up because you're pulling them tight to each other. So you see how that tightens right in? Oh, so satisfying. Now, see, I'm straight across. The needle's going in straight across from where I just came out of the canvas side. Now I'm on the backing fabric side. And I'm pulling it tight. Look at that nice little corner. Love it. And again, this is why you spent that time pinning, so you're not trying to sort of, finger it in while you're here. So, directly across from where I came out on the backing fabric. Again, this is why you need the curved needle. It's a pain, but it's a necessary evil. And then I'm going once again. So I've gone straight opposite. That's where my little thread is. See where it is? I'm coming on the opposite side in the backing fabric, doing my little, what's that, like a little 1/2 inch. Pulling it nice and tight. And you see, as you pull, it tightens it all the way along. So it keeps it. So let's go here. So again, I'm straight opposite where that was. I want to make sure I'm going through whatever I stitched. And again, I designed the canvases specifically so that you can, so that there is a little extra to sort of stitch through. So you don't have to be right on that edge. See how nice that's looking? Along there, you can't see any stitch. All right, back over. So we'll just keep going. You're doing great. Watch this 10 times if you need to. You will get the hang of it. You just pull out the pins as you go. Keep an eye on where you're at. I want to go a little bit higher. I don't think this canvas would work great with super open stitches unless you don't mind seeing the back of the, like the the inside of the hanger, like the hanger on the inside. Okay. See how it gets kind of loose? Don't worry, because in a second when you pull it, tightens all up again. So you can see better here how I'm going. Let's see how many stitches it actually is. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like 4 or 5 is sort of what I'm scooping up as I'm going through. See that? And remember, you got to keep it tight. You do have to keep that tension on. You don't want it to get loose, and then it would expose the canvas. Again, I'm right opposite. So I'm going to speed up the rest of this so you don't have to watch it all. But we're going to keep working along. I'm just putting the final few stitches in here, and I'm at the end. So I'm stitching just a little bit over where I machine stitched, just to make sure you can see the machine stitching is right in there. So I'm just going to go probably up just midway, just to make sure that they overlap and there's no potential for a gap or anything like that. Just do a couple little extra stitches through here. And then I'm going to do a little knot. And then I'm going to feed the thread back underneath. So the end is buried in here. And then just snip it. And you just kind of squeeze it and move it around a little bit until you're happy with how it looks. I feel like I could have used a little less fabric maybe and had it a bit tighter, you know what I mean? More like this. But because the imagery is so pretty of the poppies, I kind of like that it's a little bit flatter. So some of my other ones are a bit tighter around here. So you can see like these are a bit tighter. But we're not working with like the poppies on this one where we want to see the poppies. So you can look along here. Here's the, you can't see any stitches, which is really nice. It just moves along. Ends look pretty good. Trim a little there. So yeah, all good. All right, guys, so that is how you finish a needlepoint hanger. Let me know if you have any questions.